If you keep an eye on the Power BI or Fabric blog, you maybe have seen there's this new functionality since May 2025, Translytical Task Flows. And now maybe you think, what is Translytical Task Flows? It's actually the ability to add, edit, or delete data in Power BI. And this is done by writing back to a Fabric data source. And what do I mean with a Fabric data source? Now at this moment, just after the public preview of Translytical Flows, it means either a Fabric SQL database, a Fabric warehouse, a Fabric lakehouse, or a Fabric mirror database. Not the Excel file that the whole company works with for the past 10 years. It's a Fabric data source that you need to use. So we are combining Power BI and Fabric to make this possible and actually add, edit, or delete records right in Power BI. So imagine you have this Power BI report. It's about product and product sales, and sometimes, for example, the product description isn't right, and you want your users to just make these changes in Power BI directly, and not only make these changes in the report, but also write them back. Or different example, like the quantity of a product isn't right, or the discount, you want to change the discount on the product, all these kind of things. So instead of what we need to do at the moment, go back to the data source and fix it there, and then load that data again to your Fabric data source, we can now make these changes in Power BI, which means that people making these changes don't need to have the knowledge of how to do it in the data source. So that's super handy, isn't it? When I heard about this feature, I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is something a lot of my clients ask for, and they always want to edit stuff and do it directly in Power BI, and I can totally understand it. So before we get started, I just want to note something here. It's a little bit more complicated than the average thing I'm doing with Power BI. So when I'm visualizing data, Power BI has all these nice possibilities, drag and drop and format pane. This is just a little bit trickier. To do what I'm showing you today, I'm actually following a tutorial from Microsoft, and I will put that tutorial, the link to the tutorial, also in the description. So all the code I'm using, it's of that tutorial. Why am I doing this? So you can actually read the documentation if you want to read it, and you can follow along with my video. Also, in this tutorial, I will show you one thing. It's edit data. So we will edit a product description. Microsoft provides a lot more examples, and I will put a link where you can find the code to do that also in the description. So if you follow this tutorial and you think, oh, I want to try all the other stuff, I provide all the links in the description so you can try it. In this tutorial today, we will focus on this one example that you can find in the Microsoft documentation, just to keep it easy to get started and to get an idea how this works. Before we get started, there are three things that you need. You need the Fabric data source. So in this example, it's a Fabric SQL database. You need Power BI desktop, so make sure to download that. And in Fabric, you need to enable the SQL database. I will show you how to do that later on in the tutorial. And I just realized maybe there's a fourth thing, because at this moment when I'm recording this video, Translytical Task Flows are still in preview. So we need to activate that preview feature. I will also show you later on how to do that. So I will take you step by step through this, from creating a SQL database where we have our sample data and where we write back to, creating the functions to do it, and creating the report where you can actually then make the changes and write back to the SQL database. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to create the storage for our data, because we want to write some data back. We have our products and product descriptions, and we want to change the product descriptions in this tutorial. So we need somewhere to send that data and actually also pick it up. How do we do that? In this example, we will use a Fabric SQL database, and to create that, we go into Fabric. So I'm here in Fabric. Now I created a workspace, and it's called Translytical Task Flows, and it's empty at the moment. I created a new workspace, an empty workspace, because I just don't want to get distracted by any items I maybe already have in my other workspaces. Now I want to create a SQL database. At the beginning I said this needs to be enabled. if you need to enable this, you go to the settings at the top and go to the admin portal. I just search for SQL database and it's actually at the top. You see this is also at this moment of recording in preview. And for me, this is enabled. If this is not enabled for you, enable it or ask your tenant admin to enable it for this tutorial. So it's enabled for me. So I go back and I go in my workspace on new item, then I type SQL database. We see it here in store data, SQL database, also in preview. And then I click on that and we get asked, what is the name? And I call it Translytical Task Flow, username you remember. Once it is created, you see this empty database we have at the moment. We are going to use sample data. And if you click on sample data, we don't get a choice what kind of sample data we get. It's actually the Adventure Works sample data. So we just click on that and then that data is imported. Now this takes some time, but after some time it will be created, data will be imported. And then you see in the Explorer the sales tables. And this is the sample data that we import. We don't need to do anything with that now at this moment. We created that and we will actually get data from these tables and we will make some changes to it, to that description later on. But we can just go back to our workspace for now. So now when I'm in my workspace, I see I have a SQL database, there's the semantic model and an endpoint. These two are automatically created. So what do we do now? Because now we have the place where our data is stored and where we want to write back to, but now the magic needs to happen. You know, something needs to happen to actually do stuff. So what we need to do is we need to create a user data function. How do we do that? We go on new item and then we search for user data function, also in preview. Everything in this tutorial is in preview. And there you see here, develop data, create and build your software applications and data solutions, user data functions. And we click on that and we also give that a name. I call it change description, create. And then after that's created, we get automatically to this window. So this is super easy because you have one option. It's right in front of you in the screen. It's create a new sample function. And if you click on this, you go to a new screen and there we are in the functions explorer. Here we see the name of our function, Hello Fabric. There's already some information here, but you may wonder, how can I write information back using that? Not like that. First thing we're going to do is we need to connect this to our data source. So what we're going to do is we click on Manage Connections. And if you click on Manage Connections, we can say Add Data Connection. And I get to see all my connections that we could connect. You see I have different workspaces. This is our Translytical Task Flows workspace. So this is the SQL database. I click on it and we connect. Now you see an alias. Copy that to your clipboard somewhere. We need that in the next step because now that we made that connection, we want to actually write back. We can't do that with this code. We need a different code. And that code actually comes from the official Microsoft documentation tutorial page. The link for that is in the description. So please don't type this over because it's a lot, you can see that. You can just get that from the documentation that Microsoft provides. And like I said before, there are more examples. So feel free to also try the other examples. We will try the first one from the tutorial. So you maybe think, okay, this is a lot. And that's what I meant when I said this is different from like this normal Power BI user experience. Next to that, this is Fabric, of course, where we just drag and drop and you don't have to write that much code, maybe some DAX, maybe some M. Maybe if you're mainly using Power BI, this could be quite a shock for you. So I will really quickly talk you through this. Because if you copy that code from the documentation, you actually only have to change one thing, and that's this part, and that was the alias for our SQL database that we created. So in my case, the alias was this, Translytical Tasks. And what happens is that we actually say we want to connect to that database and we use a function, and then here everything that's green and has these signs in front, that's comment. And these comments are provided from the people from Microsoft that created the tutorial. So here it says, take a product description and product model ID as input parameters and write them back to the SQL database. So that's what we're going to do because we want to change the description of our product and write provide that back. In the next step in Power BI, we actually have to define these data points that are getting written back. And here it says that this is the definition, and we have a product description, which is a string, so text, and a product model ID, which is an integer, which means a number. And then we also have some error handling, because it says we don't want to provide more than 200 characters for the description. Here we establish a connection to the SQL database. Here we insert data in the product description table. And this is because we use the sample data. This is actually the table and the column. If you're using different data, then you also would need to change that part here. And of course, also that part. I know, looks like a lot. Just try this tutorial with the sample data to get a feeling for it. And that's also what I did when I saw this for the first time, just to get familiar with everything you can do, everything you can change. Don't make it too difficult in the beginning. So I just copied this and change the alias here. And what we need to do then is we publish. So we published it. It's now grayed out. And here at the left, we see write one to SQL DB. That was actually how we defined our function. So that's correct. And now I want to test this because we published it. So the function is published. It doesn't automatically do stuff. I want to test if this actually works. So what we can do is we click on this and we click on run, and then a new window opens. And now we can run it. You see we have the product description and product model ID. We see it's a string and an integer. Let's provide some information. Let's say this is a test case and the ID is 3, something like that. And we say run. Then we see the status in progress, and then we see status succeeded. Output product description was added. That's actually the output that we wanted, and I forgot that because it was down here when we scrolled. There's also a return statement in our function, and it actually says what it should state. And its product description was added. So that's also what we see here. If you would put something different here, it would also reflect here. And then the logs. These take a while. I tried this a few times before. You really need to wait a few minutes, or at least in my example, and I'm working with a Fabric trial, it took me some minutes until I saw the logs. When the logs finally were available, they showed that it succeeded. And you could also see the logs if you go to your function and then a few historical logs. At this moment, we don't see them. It takes a few minutes to appear. So I will skip that for now, but you could find the logs there. Now something very important. You need to give your end user that want to do these actions actually access to that function. So you click on share at the top right, then I choose people in your organization and I say specific people, and here we need to say execute functions and view function logs. That's important. Apply, and then I could provide the user I want to give access. In this case, it's me, my other account. This is important because otherwise they can't use it. So you could use it, but if you want your users to be able to do it, you need to give these users that want to do that these rights. Very important. So now we created the storage, we created the function, we gave our user access. So now let's go into Power BI and do the things we want to do. I open Power BI and now we want to get our data. So I click on One Lake Catalog, SQL Database Preview, because that's where our data is. And there we already see, in this case, we only have one choice, our database. So we click on that, we say connect, and maybe it asks you to authenticate, to provide your username and password. Just do that and then it will connect. And now for this tutorial, we only use 3 tables. We use the product description, the product model, and the product model product description. And normally in all my tutorials, I would say we go to transform data, give it proper names, make sure everything's formatted in the way we want. For this tutorial, we just click that load button. And now, again, very important, next to giving people access to use it, connection settings. The connection settings are direct query. What is import mode? If you're new to Power BI, that means data is imported. You have this refresh, for example, every night or every 3 hours. That, of course, does not make sense for editing data, writing back data, because you want that impact to be direct and you want to see the results directly and not just the next day. So we would use direct query here, which just gives us the data directly back. So we click on OK. And now we create our report. And we are not really creating a report because that would take way too long. We are creating a table. And I just click on the table. And if you don't see that, you need two things. The data, that's this icon, and the build pane, that's this icon. And I click on a table. And here I want two things. I want the name and the ID. And where do I find the name and the ID? If we go to data and we go to product model, product description, it's a long name, and we go for the product model ID. Now we have all kinds of products and all kinds of IDs. This is not pretty, I know, but I just want to show you how this write back functionality works. So this will probably not get any prettier. So we have that table. And now let's say we have this product, the all-purpose bike stand, and the product model ID 122. And if I put in the description, which I found in the product description table, you see a product can have the same ID, but different descriptions here. But maybe one of the descriptions, and I don't speak most of these languages, but maybe one of them is not what we want it to be. So we would like to change that. So how do we do that? We need to actually add the text slicer. You see there's this little lightning symbol here. That's because that's also new, and it's also at this moment still in preview. So if you don't see that, you need to activate that. How do you activate that? You go to settings, that's either here at the bottom right, or you go to file, options and settings here at the bottom, and then options. And then we go to the preview features. So right at the bottom, at least if you're doing this in May 2025, you will find Translytical Task Flows. You need to activate that. That's the first one. And then we have here the text slicer visual. Also activate that. You need to activate these two. And then we click OK. And then you should see it. Maybe PowerBI tells you you made a change that requires to restart PowerBI. Just close PowerBI, save what you did until now, and restart. And then you should see this text slicer. So we add the text slicer, and now we give this a title. For example, change product description. Just something easy to find it. And you can change the title by double clicking on it or by clicking on the slicer and go to visual title and fill in the title here. Now we want to put in a description here, and that should change the description there. But to do that, we first need a button, because we want to actually type in something there, click a button and change something here. So where do we get the button? We go at the top to insert buttons, and I will choose a blank button, this one. Like I said, this is not pretty, but it will work. And we could now say button style. If we go to the format pane, button style, text on mid. And now just clicking on this will not do anything. You will need to go to the action. So we click on that button, action, turn the action on, and then the type is data function. You probably only see this if you activate the preview feature for Translytical Task Flows. So we click on data function, and now it asks us where is that data function, and the data function is what we created before, that long code. So it's in my Translytical Task Flows workspace. The function set is change description, that's how we called it, and the data function is write one to SQL database. That's how we defined it, you know. So you could define this different way because this is a little bit generic, but for this tutorial it will be fine. And once we click on that, we get more options. So it asks us what is the product description, and the product description, and now this is important, will be what we put in here in this slicer, and that slicer has the name change product description. So we click on that. I will show you something. If we would call this test, and I would go on the button again and product description, this would be test. So it takes the name from that slicer we have. Let's call it change product description again. Go to our button again, and product description is change product description. And we could say auto clear after submitting, so it is removed after you submit. Let's turn that on. And now it asks us what is the product model ID. So here's how what we're going to do is going to work. We will click on something in our table. For example, here, this. Let's say we want to change that description. And then we want PowerBI to know that it should change the description where the product model ID is this. How do we do that? We go back to our button. I click on the FX button. FX is conditional formatting. And now I search for the product model ID. And that was actually in this table. You see, we have them twice in our data. It's this table, the product model table. I click on it. And then summarization is not count, it's max of product model ID. Then we actually click OK, and we see that it was added. We could remove it, we could click on it and change it if we chose the wrong field or something like that. So now if we would click here, fill in some text here, click on submit, it should change that description. Now, one thing that is super handy, what I want to do first is I go to button style, and there we have state loading. You only see that state for data function. You will not see it for other buttons. So loading, which is nice because you want your end user to know that something is happening. Maybe it's not happening in 1 second. So people start to press that button 5 times because that's what people do, including me. So you want them to know that something's happening. We have the state loading, and then we can actually say we want an icon, and it's a spinner. You could put in your own icon. Let's just add the spinner, and then we could give that some weight, some padding. I just changed some basic stuff. And also now for loading, I want a different text because I had submit, and now I want submitting. In the tutorial, they also use enter and submitting. Use states that your user understands. I think submit and submitting should be enough, and the spinner icon, but you really need to check with your end user. So now, the moment of truth. I will enter some text. This is the new product description I just wrote. I have that one selected again. I could just click on it. I wrote that text, and now I have this submit button. If you work in Power BI desktop, you need to press the control button on your keyboard and click. So that's what I'm doing, submit. And now we see we are submitting. So that's that spinner that I was talking about. And now the product description was added. And now you wonder, like, this is the product description I just added, and this is the one I changed. Now I will show you something. There's a column here in product model product description, and it says modified date. So I made this a little smaller to make it easier to read, and this is the product description that we changed, these two. And you see the old product description was on 1/6/2007, really old data. And then today, on the last day of May 2025, I changed this to this is the new product description. So what you could do in your filter is say, I only want the latest data, so only the active data. And just by doing this, you can write back your data and can use different things. We can write back, edit, delete, these kind of things. For all the options, make sure to look at the link in the description. And I hope this gives you an idea and motivates you to try it yourself, because taking these steps and following this tutorial isn't that difficult. You just really need to copy and paste all the stuff. Understanding it is the next step, but I think trying it, seeing how it works, getting a feeling for everything you're doing is really important with everything that you try to learn and understand.